The deep silence of space surrounded the human exploration vessel Horizon. The ship moved slowly through the darkness, its sensors scanning the empty region between star systems. Most of the crew was busy with normal tasks, checking equipment and writing reports about the planets they had already visited. Frank Miller stood at his engineering station, watching the power levels on his screen. His eyes were tired after 12 hours on duty. He reached for his coffee cup when a small alert appeared on his monitor. Frank sat up straight and looked closer at the readings. "Captain Rodriguez," he called out, "I'm getting some strange energy readings from Sector 7. Lisa Rodriguez turned her chair toward him. She was a tall woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. "What kind of readings, Miller?" "Very faint power signatures. They don't match anything in our database." Frank adjusted some controls. "It's big, whatever it is." Captain Rodriguez nodded. "Change course to investigate, but keep us at a safe distance." The Horizon turned slowly, its engines glowing blue as it moved toward the unknown object. On the main screen, something dark appeared against the stars. At first, it looked like a small shadow, but as they got closer, the crew fell silent. "That's a ship," said Officer Kate Ward from the science station. Her voice was barely above a whisper, "and it's enormous." The alien vessel was at least 5 times larger than the Horizon. Its shape reminded Frank of a sea creature, with a long central body and curved sections extending from the sides. Parts of it seemed to be damaged, with dark patches where hull plating was missing. Most of the ship was dark, but tiny lights flickered in some sections. "Any response to our signals?" Rodriguez asked. Eric Gomes shook his head. "Nothing, Captain. I've tried all standard frequencies." "What do we know about that ship?" Rodriguez asked, looking at Ward. "Nothing in our records matches its design," Ward replied, her fingers moving quickly over her console. "But I'm detecting atmosphere inside and very weak power systems. Some parts of the ship might be functional." Security Chief John Bennett stepped forward. "Captain, protocol says we should report this and wait for instructions. Boarding unknown alien vessels is classified as high risk." Rodriguez looked at the massive ship on the screen. She tapped her fingers on the arm of her chair, thinking, if there's anyone alive on that ship, they might need help. And if it's abandoned. She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone knew what it meant. The technology on that ship could be valuable. "We're going to board it," she decided. "Miller, Ward, Bennett, and Gomes prepare for an exploration mission. Full environmental suits and weapons. We'll take the small shuttle." 30 minutes later, the 4 crew members approached a damaged section of the alien vessel. Their small shuttle's lights illuminated a tear in the hull that seemed large enough to enter. "Atmosphere readings show breathable air inside," Ward said as they docked near the opening. "But oxygen levels are low. We should keep our suits on." They entered through the damaged hull, their suit lights cutting through the darkness. The inside of the ship was cold. Their boots made hollow sounds on the metal floor. Strange symbols covered the walls. "These corridors are huge," Bennett said, his hand never far from his weapon. "Whatever built this ship must be bigger than humans." They followed a path where emergency lights still glowed weakly. After walking for almost 20 minutes, they reached a large door. It was partially open, as if the power had failed while it was opening. "I think this is a control room," Ward said, examining symbols near the door. They squeezed through the gap into a vast chamber. Screens lined the walls, most dark, but a few showing strange symbols. In the center of the room, 3 tall figures turned to look at the humans. Frank felt his heart skip. The aliens were at least 7 feet tall with thin, almost fragile-looking bodies. Their skin was pale blue, and they had large eyes that reflected the light from the human suits. One of the aliens stepped forward. "You are not Dreth," it said in a voice that sounded strangely musical. "We did not expect to encounter another spacefaring species in this region." "We're humans," Rodriguez replied, stepping forward. "From planet Earth. We detected your ship and came to investigate. Are you in trouble? The alien made a gesture that might have been sadness. I am Zorish, captain of the Luminous Wanderer. And yes, we are in great trouble. Our ship is dying, and we cannot save it. The humans stood in silence for a moment, looking at the three tall aliens. The room was dim, lit only by emergency lights and the glow from a few working screens. What happened to your ship? Frank asked, looking around at the advanced but failing technology. Zorish gestured to a large central column in the middle of the room. Inside it, a faint blue light pulsed weakly. The quantum entanglement drive is failing. It powers everything on the Luminous Wanderer. Quantum entanglement. Kate Ward moved closer to the column, her eyes wide with interest. We've only theorized about such technology. The second alien, taller and thinner than Zorish, spoke up. I am Teelan, chief scientist. Your species could not possibly understand our technology. No offense intended. I'm Frank Miller, engineer from Earth. We might surprise you. Frank walked around the column, studying it carefully. How long have you been drifting? 37 of your Earth years, Zorish said. We have been conserving power, keeping most of our people in stasis chambers. Most of your people? John Bennett asked, his hand still near his weapon. The third alien stepped forward. I am Mavix, security coordinator. We have 10,000 of our kind in stasis throughout the ship. We three remain awake in rotation to seek help. Captain Rodriguez looked shocked. 10,000. You're carrying that many. The Luminous Wanderer was our colony ship, the most advanced vessel our civilization ever built. Zorish explained. Now it is a failing tomb unless we can repair it. Frank studied the alien technology with growing excitement. This is beyond anything we've developed, but I recognize some principles. Captain, with your permission, I'd like to try to understand their systems. Rodriguez nodded. Zorish, would you allow our engineer to examine your ship? Perhaps we can help each other. The three Heleni looked at each other, communicating silently. Finally, Zorish spoke. We have little choice. But what would you want in return? Knowledge. Rodriguez said simply. Your technology is clearly advanced. We could learn from each other. Teelan made a sound like soft bells. Learn from humans. Your species hasn't even mastered basic interstellar travel. Frank smiled. Yet here we are, with a working ship, while yours is failing. Teelan's large eyes blinked rapidly. A fair point, human. I need to contact Earth Command, Rodriguez said. If we're going to help, we'll need more people and resources. You would bring more humans aboard. Mavix asked, clearly concerned. Bennett stepped forward. How do we know we can trust you? This could be a trap. John, Rodriguez said sharply. They've been drifting for decades. If they wanted to harm us, why create such an elaborate story? Frank was already examining a control panel. Captain, this technology, it's incredible. If we could adapt some of it, learn from it. Rodriguez made her decision. I propose an alliance. We help repair your ship, and in exchange, we share knowledge and resources. Earth Command will never agree, Bennett muttered. They will when they see this technology, Frank said, not looking up from the panel he was studying. Captain, I think I understand the basic problem. Their quantum entanglement drive is impressive, but the containment field is failing. Teelan moved quickly to Frank's side. How could you possibly understand that so quickly? Frank smiled. Sometimes fresh eyes see solutions others miss. Rodriguez activated her communicator. I'm contacting the horizon. We need to bring in a full engineering team. 3 days later, a larger human ship arrived carrying 20 engineers and scientists. They'd brought equipment and materials aboard the Luminous Wanderer. Earth Command had been reluctant, but eventually agreed when they understood the potential benefits. Frank led the human team, working closely with Teelan despite their differences in approach. The humans set up a temporary base in a large chamber near the ship's core. Your species is very hands-on, Teelan observed as humans ran cables and set up equipment. Theory is good, Frank replied, connecting a power converter. But sometimes you need to get your hands dirty to fix problems. In the command center, Rodriguez and Zorish formalized their agreement. If we succeed, Zorish said, both our peoples will benefit. Rodriguez nodded. And if we fail? Then we drift until our power fails completely, Zorish said quietly. And 10,000 of my people never wake again. The weight of that responsibility settled on Rodriguez's shoulders as she watched the human and Sileni teams begin their work on the massive, failing ship. The large room near the ship's core buzzed with activity. Humans in work clothes moved between stations, setting up equipment and running tests. The Sileni watched them with mixture of hope and worry. Frank stood with Olivia Clark, a propulsion specialist with short blonde hair and quick hands. Next to them, Alan Turner, a thin man with glasses who understood quantum physics better than anyone else from Earth, studied a complex diagram on a tablet. So the problem is here. Frank pointed to the center of the quantum drive. The field should be perfectly balanced, but something is causing these fluctuations. Teelan stood nearby, his tall frame bent slightly to see the human diagrams. We have run every test based on theoretical models. The containment field should be stable. Olivia walked around the massive drive, tapping her wrench against her leg. That's your problem right there. You're too focused on theoretical models. Theory is the foundation of all proper science, Teelan said, sounding offended. Theory is great, Olivia replied, but machines in the real world don't always follow theory. They get stressed, parts wear down, materials interact in ways you can't predict on paper. Alan looked up from his calculations. She's right. Your models assume perfect conditions, but I'm seeing signs of stress fatigue in the containment rings. Frank smiled. Kaileni designed for perfection. Humans designed for reality. The human team continued their work, approaching the alien technology in ways that shocked the Kaileni. When a connection wouldn't fit, Olivia simply modified it with tools. When power levels were too low, Frank rigged a human fusion generator to boost the systems temporarily. What are you doing? Teelan asked in alarm as Frank connected human technology to the alien systems. You cannot simply connect different technologies. Watch me, Frank said with a grin. Sometimes you need to improvise. By the end of the week, Alan had created new algorithms that adapted to the real-world conditions of the drive, instead of following rigid theoretical parameters. Olivia had reinforced weak points in the physical structure that the Sileni had never considered might fail. Frank gathered everyone around the main control panel. We're ready for the first test. If this works, we should see the quantum field stabilize and power levels increase by at least 20%. Captain Rodriguez and Zorish stood side by side, watching the humans work. Your people have very unusual methods, Zorish said quietly. Rodriguez smiled. We're problem solvers. Sometimes that means thinking outside normal boundaries. Frank began the startup sequence. The massive drive hummed, the blue light at its center growing brighter. Numbers on the screens climbed steadily. Power at 15% above previous maximum, Teelan announced, surprise in his voice. Field stability improving. Everyone watched as the ship's systems responded. Lights grew brighter throughout the nearby corridors. Screens that had been dark for years flickered to life. Then a loud cracking sound echoed through the chamber. Warning lights flashed red. Power surge in Section 12. Olivia shouted, rushing to a control panel. The new connections are drawing too much power too quickly. Shut it down, Frank ordered. Helen typed commands rapidly. I can't. The systems are locked in a feedback loop. Teelan pushed forward. Allow me. His long fingers moved across the alien controls with practiced ease. The humming sound began to decrease, and the warning lights stopped flashing. That was close, Frank said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Teelan looked at the readouts. Despite the surge, power levels are stabilized at 12% above our previous maximum. Not what you promised, but an improvement. Zorish approached the humans. You made progress where we could not. But your methods, he gestured to the jury-rigged connections and modified components. They seem dangerous and unpredictable. Frank nodded. Sometimes they are. But they work. We need to refine our approach, Rodriguez said. Frank, work with Thielen to find a balance between our methods and their safety protocols. Later that evening, as most of the team rested, Frank and Thielen remained in the engine room, studying the results of their test. I don't understand how you fought to try these solutions, Thielen admitted. They don't follow any established theoretical model. Frank smiled. That's humanity's greatest strength. We don't just follow established paths. We make new ones. Perhaps, Thielen said slowly, there is something to learn from each other after all. Frank nodded. That's the idea. Your precision and our creativity. Together, we might just save this ship. As the days passed, more Xylani were awakened from stasis to help with repairs. The ship's hallways, once empty and silent, now buzzed with activity. Humans and aliens worked side by side, learning from each other. Eric Gomes spent his time with a group of Tylani communication experts. He had a natural talent for languages and quickly began to understand the musical tones and complex gestures that made up the Tylani speech. Your language has over 50 words for different types of connection, Eric said to his Tylani teacher, a female named Nilara, but only 5 words for emotions. Why is that? Nilara's large eyes blinked slowly. Connections are precise. They can be measured and defined. Emotions are less important in our culture. But you create such beautiful art, Eric said, pointing to a glowing mural on the wall that changed colors as they watched. Art is about emotion. Perhaps our people see the universe differently, Nilara replied. This is why working together is valuable. In another part of the ship, Kate Ward discovered an archive room filled with the history of the Tylani. With permission from Zorish, she began to study it. Your civilization was once very powerful, she said to Mavix, who had been assigned to watch her. What happened? Mavix's normally stern face showed a hint of sadness. We became comfortable, too sure of our superiority. When the Dreth Imperium attacked our outer colonies, we were not prepared. Who are the Dreth? Kate asked, looking up from the screen she was studying. A warlike species. They attack, take what they want, and move on. They coveted our technology, but lacked the knowledge to create it themselves. Mavix gestured to the ship around them. This vessel carried the last survivors of our colony after the Dreth destroyed our home. Kate felt a chill. Are they still out there? Always, Mavix said quietly. In the ship's training area, John Bennett watched Tylani warriors practice their fighting techniques. Their movements were precise and beautiful, almost like a dance. Your fighting style is very elegant, John said to the Tylani combat instructor. We follow patterns proven effective through mathematical analysis, the instructor explained. Each movement has purpose. John stepped onto the training mat. May I? The instructor nodded, and John took a fighting stance. In human combat, we adapt. We improvise. They sparred briefly. The Xylani's movements were perfect, but when John did something unexpected, the alien had trouble responding. Interesting, the instructor said afterward. Your unpredictability is both a strength and a weakness. Sometimes being unpredictable is the best strategy, John replied. Back in the engine room, Frank and Thielen had developed an unusual friendship. They argued constantly about methods and approaches, but each was beginning to respect the other's perspective. Your species takes too many risks, Thielen said as they worked on a power coupling. And yours is too cautious, Frank replied. Sometimes you need to take a chance to make progress. Thielen handed Frank a tool. I have been studying your Earth history. Your people have survived many challenges through this. Adaptability. It's what we do best, Frank said with a smile. When things go wrong, we find a way forward. In the command center, Captain Rodriguez received a message from Earth Command. She read it with a frown, then went to find Zorish. My superiors are concerned, she told the Tylani captain. They want to know what will happen once your ship is repaired. They fear you might become a threat. Zorish looked surprised. We seek only to find a new home. Our people are scientists and explorers, not conquerors. I believe you, Rodriguez said, but fear makes humans cautious. They've ordered me to prepare contingency plans. You mean methods to disable our ship if necessary, Zorish said, not angry but understanding. Rodriguez nodded. I don't want to, but those are my orders. Your honesty is appreciated, Captain, Zorish said. Perhaps this is a chance to build more trust between us. That evening, the humans and Xylani gathered for a shared meal. It was awkward at first. The species ate different foods and had different customs, but soon they began to share stories and ideas. As Frank watched humans and aliens talking together, he felt hopeful. Two completely different species, finding common ground and working together. It seemed impossible just weeks ago. Then the ship's alarms began to sound. The alarms echoed through the ship, a high-pitched sound that made the humans cover their ears. Everyone in the dining area jumped to their feet. What's happening? Rodriguez asked, looking at Zorish. The Xylani captain was already moving toward a communication panel. Perimeter alert. Something has entered our sensor range. They rushed to the command center. The main screen showed a small ship approaching. It had a dark, angular shape that looked threatening even from a distance. Dreth, Mavic said, his voice tight with fear. A scout vessel. Are you sure? John asked, moving closer to the screen. We know their ships well, Zorish replied. They've hunted us for years. Frank looked at the ship's status displays. How functional are our defenses? Teelan checked the readings. Power levels at 28%. Not enough for weapons or shields at full capacity. Can they detect us? Rodriguez asked. Almost certainly, Zorish said. Our power signature is weak, but they know what to look for. The humans and Xylani watched as the Dreth ship moved closer. It was much smaller than the Luminous Wanderer, but clearly well armed. They'll report finding us, Mavic said. Then a battle fleet will come. How long would that take? Rodriguez asked. 3 weeks, perhaps 4, Zorish replied. Not enough time to complete our repairs. Everyone was silent for a moment. Then Eric spoke up. What if they think we're not here? They can see us, Teelan said. But what if they think we're destroyed? Eric continued. You have cloaking technology, right? I saw it in the technical readouts. The cloaking system is damaged, Teelan replied, and it requires too much power. Frank's eyes lit up. But we don't need to cloak completely. We just need to create an illusion. Rodriguez understood immediately. ECM, electronic countermeasures. We use them to confuse enemy sensors. If we combine your damaged cloaking technology with our ECM techniques, Frank said excitedly, we might be able to make them think the ship was destroyed. Zorish looked doubtful. That would require precise timing and coordination. It's that or fight with partial weapons against a ship designed for battle, John pointed out. And if we destroy their scout, they'll definitely send a battle fleet to investigate, Mavic added. Rodriguez made her decision. Let's try the deception. Frank, what do you need? Get me Olivia and Alan, and every portable power cell we have, Frank said, already moving toward the door. Over the next few hours, the humans and Xylani worked frantically. They'd rigged the damaged cloaking system to work with human ECM equipment. The plan was to create a false energy surge that would look like a catastrophic core failure, then use the cloak to hide most of the ship while ejecting some debris. They're scanning us, Mavic reported as they finished preparations. They'll be in weapons range in 10 minutes. We're ready, Frank said, wiping sweat from his face. But there's a problem. Someone needs to manually adjust the quantum field projectors during the fake explosion. The controls in this section are damaged. I'll do it, Olivia volunteered. No, Frank shook his head. I know these systems best. I'll go. Frank, along with two Xylani technicians, put on spacesuits. They would have to go outside the ship to reach the field projectors. Be careful, Rodriguez told Frank as he prepared to leave. This whole plan fails if you can't adjust those projectors at exactly the right moment. No pressure, Frank said with a nervous smile. The three stepped into an airlock and soon were outside, moving carefully along the hull of the massive ship. They could see the Dreth vessel approaching, its weapons visibly powering up. Get into position, Frank told the technicians through his suit radio. When I give the signal, activate your controls exactly as we planned. Inside the ship, Rodriguez and Zorish stood side by side on the command deck. Ready for deception sequence, Rodriguez said. Beginning power surge simulation, Teelan reported. Fields destabilizing. Now. The ship shuddered. Lights flickered dramatically. Ejecting debris, Mavix announced, pressing a control. Outside, Frank watched as pieces of scrap metal and damaged hull sections flew from the ship. He waited for the exact moment, then shouted into his radio. Now. The three spacewalkers activated their controls simultaneously. A wave of energy rippled across the ship's surface, creating the illusion of a catastrophic explosion while the cloaking field engaged. Did it work? Rodriguez asked tensely. On the screen, they watched as the Dreth ship slowed its approach and began scanning the debris field. They're buying it, Mavix whispered. They think we're destroyed. But then a warning light flashed on Teelan's panel. Power fluctuations in the field generators. They're overloading. Frank clung to the outside of the massive ship, watching in horror as energy surged around him. Through his suit radio, he could hear the panic inside. Field generators are at critical levels, Teelan's voice reported. They were never designed to operate this way. Frank, get back inside now, Rodriguez ordered. Not yet, Frank replied, his voice steady despite his fear. If these generators fail, the Dreth will see us. He moved quickly across the hull to the nearest generator. The Xylani technicians had already retreated to safety, but Frank kept going. He reached the access panel and pulled it open. Inside, energy crackled dangerously. I need to manually recalibrate, he told the others. Keep the Dreth distracted. Inside the ship, Rodriguez looked at Zorish. How much longer will the Dreth stay? They are thorough, the alien captain replied. They will scan the debris for at least another hour. We don't have an hour, Teelan said, pointing to the power readouts. The system will fail in minutes. Outside, Frank worked frantically, rerouting power and adjusting the field alignment. His hands moved quickly despite the bulky spacesuit gloves. Sweat trickled down his face inside his helmet. Almost there, he muttered to himself. Just hold together a little longer. On the command deck, everyone watched the screens with tension. The Dreth ship continued to scan the debris field, apparently still unaware that the luminous wanderer was intact. Power levels dropping fast, Teelan reported. 50%, 40%. Olivia stood near the engineering station, hands gripping the edge of the console. Frank, hurry, she urged through the communication link. Outside, Frank made one final adjustment. The energy surges stabilized momentarily, then began to build again. It's not holding, he said. I need to try something else. There's no time, Teelan replied. Get back inside. Frank looked at the approaching Dreth ship, then at the failing generator. He made a quick decision. I'm going to use my suit's power cell to stabilize the field. It should buy us enough time. That's too dangerous, Rodriguez protested. Your suit will lose life support. I can hold my breath, Frank replied with forced humor. He disconnected his suit's main power cell and quickly wired it into the generator systems. The effect was immediate. The energy surges calmed, and the readouts on the command deck stabilized. It's working, Teelan said in amazement. Field stability at 60% and holding. Frank pushed away from the generator and began moving back toward the airlock, using just his momentum and occasional bursts from his suit's emergency thrusters. Without the main power cell, his suit was quickly losing heat and air. "How's our Dreth friend?" he asked, his breathing already becoming labored. "Still scanning the debris," Mavix reported. "They seem convinced we're destroyed." "Good," Frank said. He could see the airlock ahead, but it seemed very far away. His vision started to blur as the oxygen in his suit depleted. Inside, everyone watched Frank's life signs on a monitor. His oxygen levels were dropping dangerously. "He's not going to make it," Olivia said, her voice breaking. Just then, the airlock outer door opened. Two Tailani in spacesuits emerged and moved quickly toward Frank. They reached him just as he lost consciousness, grabbed him, and pulled him back toward the airlock. Minutes later, Frank was inside the medical bay, breathing oxygen through a mask while doctors examined him. "The Dreth ship is leaving," Mavix reported from the command center. "They believe we're destroyed." Rodriguez stood beside Frank's bed. "You almost died out there." Frank removed the mask briefly. "Did it work?" "Yes, but at a high cost," Rodriguez replied. "The strain burned out critical systems. The ship is in worse condition now than before." Zorish entered the medical bay. "The Dreth will report back to their fleet. We have perhaps 3 weeks before they return to collect salvage from what they believe is our destroyed ship." 3 weeks, Frank repeated, sitting up despite the doctor's protests. "Then we need to get to work." "What are you thinking?" Rodriguez asked, recognizing the look in his eyes. "If we can't repair the ship that Xilani way in time," Frank said, "then we'll have to do it the human way." "And what way is that?" Zorish asked. Frank smiled. "We're going to completely reinvent your ship, using everything we know, every trick, every crazy idea. We're going to turn this failing vessel into something the galaxy has never seen before." Teelan, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "That would mean changing systems that have been designed by our greatest minds over centuries." "Exactly," Frank said. "Sometimes you need to break the rules to make something better." Rodriguez looked at Zorish. "It's risky." The 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Humans and Xilani worked together day and night, transforming the luminous wanderer into something new. Frank named the rebuilt ship Phoenix, after the mythical bird that rises from its own ashes. Frank's plan was bold. Instead of trying to repair the original systems exactly as they were designed, the humans completely reimagined them. The Tailani built everything around one central power core, Frank explained to Captain Rodriguez. "That's elegant but dangerous. If the core fails, everything fails." "So what's your solution?" she asked. "We're creating a distributed power network," Frank said. "Multiple smaller generators throughout the ship. If one fails, the others take over." The Tailani were shocked by the changes. When Teelan saw humans installing manual backup controls alongside the automated systems, he was horrified. "This is unnecessary redundancy," he protested. "The logic systems never fail." "Until they do," Olivia replied, continuing to install the manual controls. "Then you'll be glad to have these." Alan Turner created an entirely new operating system that combined quantum computing with human neural network design. It was less elegant than the original Tailani system, but far more adaptable. "Your system follows rules perfectly," Alan explained to a group of Tailani scientists. "Our new system learns and adapts." The weapons systems were upgraded using Earth military targeting technology. The shields were rebuilt to incorporate both technologies, making them more flexible and responsive. Not all the Xilani approved of these changes. One morning, Zorish called Frank to the command center. "Many of my people feel we are desecrating our technology," Zorish said. "They want me to stop this project." Frank looked around at the half-finished work. "And what do you think?" Before Zorish could answer, Teelan entered the room. "I believe we should continue," he said. "The humans' methods are strange, but I have seen their effectiveness." Zorish nodded slowly. "Then we proceed." On the final day before the Dreth were expected to return, the Phoenix was ready for its first full power test. The command deck was filled with both humans and Cylani, all watching nervously as Frank initiated the startup sequence. One by one, the distributed power generators came online. Lights brightened throughout the ship. Screens lit up with information. "Power at 100%, Frank announced, all systems functioning. A cheer went up from the humans. The Cylani didn't cheer, but many made a musical humming sound that expressed their joy. "The ship is stronger than it ever was," Teelan said with wonder, "and in ways we never imagined." The celebration was cut short by an alarm. Mavix checked the sensors. "Dreth ships incoming," he announced. 15 warships. Everyone fell silent. 15 ships was far more than they had expected. The main screen showed the approaching fleet. The Dreth vessels were black and angular, bristling with weapons. They moved into a formation surrounding the Phoenix. "They've detected us," Mavix said. "Our power signature is too strong to hide now." A message came through on the communication system. A harsh voice spoke in the Cylani language. "What are they saying?" Rodriguez asked. "They're ordering us to surrender the ship and prepare to be boarded," Zorish translated. "The commander says they've hunted our kind for centuries and won't stop until they have all our technology." Rodriguez looked at Zorish. "This is your ship. What do you want to do?" The alien captain stood straight, his thin frame suddenly seeming stronger. "We will not surrender. We will fight." Rodriguez nodded. "Then let's show them what Phoenix can do." Frank moved to the engineering station. All power systems ready. Shields at maximum. John Bennett took the weapons console. Targeting systems online. On the main screen, the lead Dreth ship fired a warning shot that passed close to the Phoenix. "They're demanding immediate surrender," Mavix reported. Zorish and Rodriguez exchanged a look. Then together, they gave the order. "Engage." The Phoenix moved forward, its new engines glowing with power. The Dreth ships responded immediately, opening fire with all weapons. Energy beams struck the Phoenix's shields. "Shields holding at 90%. Frank called out. "The hybrid design is working." John targeted the nearest Dreth ship and fired. The Phoenix's weapons, enhanced with human targeting systems, hit with perfect accuracy. The Dreth ship's shields flared and weakened. "They didn't expect us to fight back," Rodriguez said. "Now's our chance to show them what humans and Cylani can do together." The battle had begun. The battle raged around the Phoenix. The 15 Dreth warships fired continuously, their weapons creating a light show against the darkness of space. But the Phoenix held strong. "Shields at 70%, Frank called out from his station. "Distributed power grid is working perfectly. When one section gets damaged, power automatically routes around it." John fired the weapons again, disabling the engines on one of the Dreth ships. "Human targeting systems were a good addition," he said with a smile. "They can't predict our firing patterns." The ship shuddered as a particularly strong blast hit them. Warning lights flashed on several consoles. "Hull breach in Section 14, Teelan reported. "Sealing it now," Frank replied, working his controls. "The automatic repair systems are responding." Rodriguez watched the battle unfolding on the main screen. 3 Dreth ships had been disabled, but 12 remained, and they were adjusting their tactics. "They're concentrating fire on our port side," Mavix warned. "Rotate the ship," Zorish ordered. "Keep presenting different shield sections." The Phoenix turned gracefully, spreading the damage across multiple shield areas instead of letting one section fail. This was a human battle tactic that Cylani had never used before. Engineering teams rushed through the ship making real-time repairs. Unlike the original Cylani design, the Phoenix was built to be repaired during battle. Access panels were easy to reach, and systems were clearly labeled. "We've destroyed 5 enemy ships now," John reported, "but we're taking heavy damage." Another blast rocked the ship. This time, several consoles exploded in showers of sparks. "Main power dropping," Frank shouted, "down to 45%. Olivia pushed her way to the front of the command deck. "Captain, I have an idea. It's risky, but it might work." "Let's hear it," Rodriguez said. "We intentionally overload the quantum core," Olivia explained quickly. "Not to explode, but to create a localized space-time distortion. It could disable the Dreth ships without destroying them." "That's incredibly dangerous," Teelan protested. "The core was never designed for that." "But it might work," Frank said, joining the conversation. "The human modifications we made allow for power surges in ways the original design never could." Rodriguez looked at Zorish. "It's your ship." The alien captain watched as another Dreth blast hit them. "Do it." Olivia and Frank rushed to the engineering station. They worked together, fingers flying over the controls. "Ready," Olivia said finally. "But once we start this, we can't stop it. All crews, brace for extreme gravitational distortion," Rodriguez announced ship-wide. Then she nodded to Olivia. "Now." Olivia pressed the final control. The lights throughout the ship dimmed, then brightened intensely. A low humming sound built to a painful whine. "Core temperature rising," Frank shouted. "Containment holding." "Barely." On the main screen, a visible wave of distorted space expanded from the Phoenix. When it reached the Dreth ships, their engines flickered and died. Weapons went silent. The ships began to drift. "It worked," Olivia cried out. "Their systems are offline." The Phoenix itself shuddered violently, then steadied. "Damage report," Zorish requested. "The core is stable but weakened," Frank reported. "Overall power at 30%. We won't be able to do that again." "We won't need to," Rodriguez said, pointing at the screen. The remaining Dreth ships were moving away, retreating from the battle. "They're leaving," Mavic said in disbelief. "They've never retreated before." The command deck was silent for a moment. Then cheers erupted from the human crew. Even the Tailani made their musical humming sounds of joy. 2 days later, Earth Command arrived with a fleet of ships, responding to Rodriguez's earlier messages. They approached the Phoenix cautiously, unsure what to make of the hybrid vessel. Admiral Paul Chambers from Earth Command came aboard for a meeting with Rodriguez and Zorish. "I don't know whether to congratulate you or court-martial you," the Admiral said to Rodriguez after hearing their story. "You've created potentially the most powerful ship in the known galaxy." "We created it together," Rodriguez corrected, nodding toward Zorish. "Human ingenuity and Tailani precision. It's stronger than either of us could have built alone." The Admiral looked troubled. "Some people back home will see this ship as a threat." "Then let them see it as a symbol instead," Zorish suggested. "A symbol of what different species can achieve together." 1 week later, the Phoenix was officially commissioned as the first vessel of a joint human-Tailani fleet. The remaining stasis chambers were moved to Earth colonies, where the Tailani would establish their new home. Frank stood with Teelan on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Where do you think the Phoenix will go first?" Frank asked. "Wherever we choose," Teelan replied. "For the first time in decades, we have real choices again." As if on cue, Captain Rodriguez and Captain Zorish entered the deck. "We have our first mission," Rodriguez announced. "Diplomatic outreach to 3 new species. We're going to show the galaxy what cooperation can achieve." The Phoenix departed the next day, its unique hybrid design now recognized throughout the stars as representing the best of both species. Tailani precision and human ingenuity combined to create something greater than either could have imagined.